Inside the Practice. I'm your host, Alan Hollander, and I am really excited to kick things off here with our inaugural, I guess it's inaugural, good word for this, for what's happening lately. This is our first show, our first podcast designed to bring you expert-led discussions and insights that are actionable, things that you can take back to your office and do things with. And these are coming from leaders in the dental world. Whether you're a dentist, a practice owner, part of a dental support team, we want this podcast to be your go-to resource for staying ahead of the curve and making your practice even stronger. I am delighted to introduce my co-host, Sarah Boylan. Sarah, how are you today?
Fantastic. Alan, thank you so much for allowing me to be your co-host on this. I'm so excited. I've been a practice manager for about 15 years, and so I'm really looking forward to bringing some of my own insights. And this podcast in particular has a great lineup of some excellent speakers over the next several months. And so I'm excited to dive in on all of these conversations with you and kick off by starting with my friend and professional colleague here, Elliott Tracy.
Hey, Sarah. Thank you. I'm excited to be here today.
Yeah, great to have you, Elliott, and Sarah. Just delighted to be doing this. I mean, together we're going to be bringing our audience conversations with top industry voices like Elliott, just looking at everything from tax strategies to the latest advancements in dentistry, and everything in between. Our goal is simple. It's to help you connect with like-minded professionals, gather insights that can truly drive excellence in your practice, and also, of course, improve the quality of your lives. So that is really what we want to do. I want to get rolling here with our guest, Elliott Tracy. Elliott, welcome to the show. Before we dive in with you, give us a little bit about yourself and your journey into the world of accounting.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. So I have been in the accounting industry now since 2008. It was kind of an interesting time to get started. We were in quite an economic crash, and didn't seem like I had much more than about 6 months of employment before I was curious to even know if I would be continuing in the industry. It was so bad. But we got through that. Industry is stronger than ever, and things have been great. And I've been working with dentists now for probably most of that 16 years. I got into that pretty much right away with the previous firm I was with, and really enjoyed the challenges of working with practices and what their needs were. And so, been doing that Excellent. For a while now.
That's very good. Well, I'm just interested in how did you happen to choose dentistry as your kind of niche or your specialty? What drew you to this unique market?
Yeah, that's a funny story. Actually, about the same time I had really started my career in accounting, I had met my current wife, and she worked in a dental office as both an assistant and an office manager. And I would come home and tell her about my day, and then she would come home and tell me about her day. And it seemed like there were a lot of ways the skill sets that I had, there was a lot of ways that we could help. And so when I kind of heard those stories, it just opened that opportunity and started exploring ways of doing that and try to do it in creative and strategic planning, and just kind of went from there and just blossomed into what it is today.
That's excellent, and the rest is history.
Yep, the rest is history.
Good. Okay, wonderful. Well, let's jump in with some questions here that I think are very, very, very relevant, particularly based upon the time of the year. I mentioned this is our inaugural podcast. Speaking of inaugurations, we have a new administration on the horizon.
Mm-hmm.
that will be coming in January of next year. I'm very interested. I believe our listeners will too in potential changes in the tax laws that practice owners should be prepared for. We hear so many different things, Elliott.
Yeah.
Some are rumor, some are fact, and we're interested in getting it from somebody who really understands and knows what's going on. So help us out on that.
Yeah, and for the let's kind of go back. So, like starting in 2017 with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that really kicked in 2018 tax year. That was really first time we saw quite a bit of significant changes for small business owners, individuals. There was a lot of tax law that came in with that, and it really kind of shook things up in a lot of different ways. And that was all passed in Trump's first administration. And so I think what we're seeing right now with him coming in again is a potential of a lot of those things continuing. And everything I've read kind of points in that direction is whatever tax law that we see should be very small business friendly, and then should be for the most part pretty friendly for individuals depending on different situations. A couple of like big ones that and I've been reading through a lot of just commentary at this point because obviously we don't have any legislation and we won't have any legislation for some time. But that Tax Cut and Jobs Act, the majority of what was passed will be expiring here in the next year or two. And so if those items, if that tax law expires without any changes, then what happens is we revert back to what we had in 2016, 2017, and before. Some of those items, well, really the biggest one that most are going to be that most will be concerned with is the tax rates really at every level are going to be adjusted. So the top tax rate will go back up. A lot of the rates in the middle will also be increased slightly. So, really, we would like to see as small business owners what is currently in place continuing. Two of the ones that I've really kind of focused on, I'm kind of keeping my eye on the most, is what's called Section 199A. Section 199A, commonly referred to as the qualified business income deduction. What that is, that's a 20% deduction on income that comes from either partnerships, S corporations, really the pass-through entities that are most common in the dental world. So, pretty much 100% of the dentists I work with, I can't think of one at the moment. They're all using some type of partnership or S corporation to harness their practice income, and then that flows to them personally. And there's the ability there to take a 20% deduction against that income. So if you have $100,000 of net practice income after all of your expenses, including compensation, all those items, that is eligible for this 20% deduction. So in the example of 100,000, it go to 20%. So it is effectively reducing your tax rate by a couple of percentage points if you're eligible for it. The reason I mention it, and it's really interesting to kind of see where it goes, is dental, accounting, attorneys, consultants, a lot of professional services. And so those industries that rely on the expertise of the person generating the income, those industries have had significant limitations depending on how much money you've made. So like for this year, if your taxable income is over about $480,000 and you have income from one of those industries, which is referred to as a specified service industry, you're going to miss out on this 20% deduction. It gets phased out. So the reason that I'm closely keeping an eye on it is, one, will it continue? And I think there's a high potential it will. Everything I've read so far is that it wants to continue. But will it continue with these same limitations? I'm really hoping that it doesn't. I'm hoping that some of those limitations are either raised or maybe even potentially go away and give more practice owners the ability, to take advantage of it. Another one.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah, I'd love to explore that in a little more detail with you. Because it's a huge, it seems to represent potentially a huge savings.
Yeah, and it is a big savings. And, there's a lot of strategies, and I talked about that limitation. There's a lot of strategies we try to implement to, if a taxpayer is above that limitation, trying to get them down below that limitation. Because what we're seeing is if a practice owner is right on the cusp of that limitation where they're missing out maybe on some of it or even all of it, if they can do certain things like implementing a retirement plan or other deductions, buying equipment, like there's all kinds of things we can look at to lower that income. But if we find ways of lowering that income and getting them into or below certain limitations, the tax savings is like 45+% and even higher depending on what state you're in. So the federal rate alone is anywhere between 42 to 45% tax savings. And that's because not only are you getting that rate lowered at 37% or maybe around that 35%, but now you're getting an additional qualified business income deduction that didn't cost you any additional money. So you might spend $100,000 and now you're saving $45,000 instead of what normally would be like 37.
Interesting. And that 100,000 can go towards that could go towards consulting or professional services of some kind.
Yeah, it can go towards any number of things that create a current year deduction. Yeah.
Very good.
Elliott, I was going to ask, will you help guide the doctor for like the price point of what they were going to need to be able to get that? So if they were looking at a cone beam or professional services and consulting, something like that, you could help guide them a little bit for that?
Yeah, and that's really where we're at right now. This month, the month of December, like me, I personally, it's meetings pretty much every single day talking through those strategies, especially for certain practice owners, is how do we get you to that point to where we can still take advantage of it? Because all the commentary says it's still going to be around, but if it's not, like we want to make sure we take advantage of it while it's still here, and maybe accelerating deductions into a year where in other years we might say to wait. We might decide to wait on that because of tax rates being higher or whatever, whatever that might be. So we are definitely doing a significant amount of planning around this deduction, and it's a really it's a big component of really tax savings for small business owners.
Wow, certainly is.
Yeah. The other one I've really kind of kept my eye on with the potential legislation is it's referred to as the state and local tax limitation. So it's the SALT cap. And if anybody's looked at their personal tax return the last several years and you look at Schedule A, itemized deductions, those itemized deductions for a married filing joint couple is limited to $10,000. So depending on what state you're in, like Oregon, California, New York, these states where the personal or the state income taxes are higher, you're not getting all of the benefit of those taxes that you're paying, whether it's coming out, whether you're just making payments or whether it's coming out of your wages as withholdings. Those items are getting capped. And so state and local taxes and also property taxes fall into that $10,000 limitation. So what happened is most states, like in 2020, some of them started it, most of them kind of kicked it in 2021. They created this kind of pass-through entity level deduction where if you had an S corp or a partnership, you could pay your personal taxes through the entity if done in you made the correct elections. It depends on the state you were in, but if you made the correct elections, you get that deduction at that level, and then you'd get a credit on your personal return. So the reason it was so important was that you would then be able to reduce your federal income tax because it was no longer an itemized deduction. It was a deduction that was part of the practice. Most states, almost all of them that I've read so far, is that if this limitation of 10,000 goes away, which there's a lot of discussion about it, now you're going to be able to pay for it on your as itemized deduction again. These little workarounds or these pass-through entity elections, those are going to start to go away, and we're going to see those removed. And why that's really interesting, and this kind of jumps back to 2016, 17, one of the things that impacts a lot of individual taxpayers, depending on your income level, is something called the alternative minimum tax. And so when you have the alternative minimum, if you pay so much in state taxes, the alternative minimum tax doesn't allow you to deduct those items. And so now you may be subject to this other form of tax calculation that is higher than your normal tax because of those itemized deductions. So we could be, yes, losing out on this way of paying your taxes and then be able to deduct them, but then you're going to lose the benefit anyways because of the alternative minimum tax. So those are really like the two ones with this, with this administration change and what we're potentially going to see that I'm really kind of spending most of my time keeping an eye on, because I think honestly they have the biggest impact to the practice owners that I work with.
Well, what blows my
Fascinating.
mind is
Yeah.
how much
Yeah.
how on top of all of this stuff you are. I mean, you must spend hours reading and studying and keeping yourself, abreast of everything that's coming down the pipeline. I'm impressed.
Yeah, I've tried to spend a fair amount of time. Obviously, like it's just it's going to have a big impact. I think it's important, that the practice owners are aware of these types of things and really kind of make sure that they're taking advantage of all their opportunities.
Without a doubt, it's interesting. Having been in practice management for several decades, the average doctor, they get interested, Elliott, in issues and situations when they're faced with them,
Mm-hmm.
not out of neglect, but simply out of because of what their focus is.
Mm-hmm.
Their focus is clinical, their training is clinical,
Yeah.
their delivery is clinical, and in dentistry, you eat what you kill, and so the more time and focus they spend at chairside, the better the practice does.
Yeah. And as you
So
both
things
and as
such
you
as
both know, how much business school did a dentist go through when they went to school, right?
exactly. Yes, I know. I built a company on that,
Yeah.
and yeah. So yeah. So it really behooves not just any individual, but we're speaking to dentists here to really do some strategizing. I know a lot of people overlook this, and
Mm-hmm.
their strategizing becomes meeting with their accountant at the end of the year and perhaps
Yeah.
taking a little bit of a look at the following year. But good planning, wow, what a difference this can make in savings.
Yeah, it's really one of the things within the accounting industry that's kind of been to its detriment is you want a level of certainty on things, and so only to have that level of certainty, it's better to look backwards, right? Like, okay, what happened last year? What's
Yeah.
the results?
Yeah.
But when you're always looking backwards, it's really hard to plan for forward, right?
Exactly.
And there's a lot of missed opportunities if you're not looking at things kind of frequently, whether it's twice a year or 3 times a year, just getting an idea where you're at and kind of planning for those opportunities to make sure you don't miss out on the things that are available to you.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, because don't you meet with your clients like 3 to 4 times, like quarterly, on a regular basis with your clients to make sure that everything is on track for their goals for the year?
Yeah, we usually meet with most of the offices on a quarterly basis, and that really, a couple of things I think it does, and not only like with these planning things, it's really easy to kind of pinpoint that as low-hanging fruit, right? Like we can save you X amount of dollars by doing this. But what I think it really helps too is just with seeing that cycle of profitability throughout the year, because there are different times where practices are just busier than other times. And every practice to some extent has some type of cycle during the year. They're going to see dips, you're going to see those peaks.
Yes.
And just kind of weathering those. And as you go year over year, if you're doing that consistent planning, you're going to start to see those trends and do a better job of planning for, okay, we know this month historically is a down month for us. Or, hey, this month is historically a down month. How do we improve on that so it's not a down month?
Without a doubt. Yes, without a doubt. Yeah, very valuable, particularly this time of the year, which
Yeah.
can be feast or famine, depending upon how you look at it and how you plan for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Speaking of profitability, Elliott, I'm interested in any insight that you can share related to. I know that you do focus on this as well, which is
Mhm.
one of the things that I've always liked about the kind of work that you do with dentists, because this is something that we have always focused on very, very clearly. Dentists are extremely interested, of course, in growth and profitability,
Mhm.
as any business person would be. Any tips or thoughts about uh, methods and things that you advise related to profitability?
Yeah, and it's a great question because really, like, we spend a lot of time talking about overhead, right? And like, what's your overhead and how
Yeah.
does that kind of fall? Like, if you were to look at it in like a pie chart, like, what's each of those percentages of your total expenses, right? Like, where do you spend most of your money? And every office, they're going to spend the majority of their money on salaries, wages for their staff, right? It's just kind of the way the industry works. And accounting's not all that dissimilar, right? Like, we need a lot of manpower to get work done. So when we talk about profitability, we really try to hone in on those things that we can, control, and then how are certain things being affected by, where we're at today. Like, inflation for the last couple of years has been up pretty significantly, and we're seeing practice owners take that hit not only in wages, right, but
Yep.
in their supplies, in their lab fees, depending on what kind of practice that they have, those ratios of income in a lot of those areas, we're seeing them creep up a little
Yep.
bit.
Yep.
And so trying to help owners navigate that and explaining the difference between, if you want to improve your overhead, there's really only two ways to do it. You either increase that top line of what you're collecting, or you reduce the actual expense itself. And how do you do that? I mean, there's a number of ways we go about that, but it's really comes down to those two things: is there more capacity for more collections, or do we have to start looking at ways of improving, from a cost management standpoint?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah, I know you and I talked about this recently. Like, replacing people is expensive
Yeah.
in terms of replacing staff. And
Yes.
I think that's been the biggest hurdle that I've seen. And would love to get your guys' thoughts on that as well, because I would think that's probably the biggest hurdle you're seeing with the practices you work with.
It comes up constantly,
Yeah.
constantly. I mean, we talk to dozens of doctors every single week,
Mm-hmm.
and the subject of personnel is constant.
Mm-hmm.
It's constant, and the cost of personnel, is constant.
Yeah.
It's interesting. What we see is practices that are quite stable organizationally. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we're our view. We will look at numbers not as carefully as you do. We probably should utilize you more on this. We focus on the top line,
Yeah.
and our view, our premise, one of our basic premises is that uh, um, the most money a business, not just a practice, it's certainly true in dentistry, the most money you will lose, the biggest loss, is what you leave on the table
Mm-hmm.
and what you don't make that you could be making.
Yeah.
So a practice that actually can be doing another 20 to 25% a year, and it's doable. Just good efficiency, good procedures, good systems, good
Yeah.
training and coaching for staff, and I won't get into that. Those there's the organic growth and creating
Mm-hmm.
that difference between bottom line and top line.
Yeah.
And we certainly focus on pushing systems that will increase those numbers.
Yeah.
So yeah, fascinating. Uh,
Yeah. Extremely. Yeah.
yeah, give us another tidbit or two. I love this stuff. This is great.
Well, and I think you kind of hit on it too, like with profitability. I would tend to agree, like a practice that has that kind of consistent, either that consistent staff, consistent management, or those processes, one that's a mature practice that knows what they're doing is good, is, you know, almost always going to be more profitable, right? And it really comes down to, like you said, it's those staff internal efficiencies that they've created. They know what they need to be doing.
Exactly.
And whether that's as simple as having, you know, those daily goals, right? Like, you know what number you want to hit on a pretty consistent basis.
Yes.
It's a really simple, seems like a really simple, easy thing to do. But if you're doing it consistently, like, those practices I see are generally doing better than others.
Yeah. You know, so interesting. You know, you'd think that it's that easy, and it is.
Mm-hmm.
But the number of times, and of course, I'm in again constant conversation with this market, with individual doctors, and you ask about, you know, well, what did the practice do? You ask the simplest metrics, and you know, how is your month? How is your month?
Yeah.
Good. but no recognition of no real recognition of the numbers,
Right.
and
Yeah.
and so it's just, you know, it's a little bit, it's not being fixated on numbers or fixated on these details, but you know, knowing them and understanding what they mean is so important. And where that's present in a practice, where they have a support person
Mm-hmm.
who is watching that for them and keeping them aware of it, those practices exercise better control. They have more control over their numbers.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, it's a bit hard to get across. Takes a lot of doing to get it across. Okay,
Yeah.
very good, excellent. Yeah. Hey, so just totally off the subject here, Elliott. Like, you are a wrestler. You're like, no, I don't mean Hulk Hogan.
No.
I don't mean, but you know, Hulk lives right here in the neighborhood, by the way. But you competed in a national wrestling tournament in Vegas, didn't you? Just
Yeah, that
not
was,
too long ago.
would that have been? That'd be about 18 months ago now. I did skip it this last year. It just wasn't in the cards for me, but I did, after a number of years of just coaching and kind of being on the sideline and hanging out. I had met some guys here in the area that still like to compete and wanted to get together, and they've been going, and you know, it sounds like a bigger deal than it is. I mean, it's the U.S. Open for wrestling, but
Whoa, man.
you know, we're in kind of the old man age group now, and it was still a fantastic time, and I do certainly plan on going to do it again this year. So, and maybe it's an every other year thing for me after I heal up from the previous one.
Yeah, I get it.
The picture I saw of you, Elliott, looked amazing. I mean, I was like, is that my CPA? He looks so tough, so, like, you know, bulked up. I was totally impressed.
You know, the to your point, I know we're going to address this at various times through these podcasts, but the balance of work and life.
Oh yeah.
I imagine. I mean, if you're going to do that, it's a good idea to train. You know.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I mean, I've met doctors over the years who are marathoners, triathletes, long distance bike riding, and it takes training and incredible discipline to do that. But that balance is so important.
Yeah.
You know, especially when you're fixated on a very, very small area for, you know, 7-8 hours a day. There's all kind of interesting studies about individuals who, like those who sit at a computer for a certain number of hours a day, the distance that they observe at becomes whatever the distance is upon which they've been fixated for a certain number of hours. So that person walks out and their observation, their capacity to observe goes way, way down.
Yeah.
It's kind of like their attention goes out to that particular point. So getting out there and doing these other activities is extremely therapeutic and really important.
Yeah, no, and I'm with you on that. I mean, I personally find that if I don't do something at least every single day, whether it's, and I've been coaching now for quite some time and spend almost every day, pretty much every day, either on the field or on a wrestling mat helping out. And if I don't find some type of physical activity every day, I notice my own personal mental health does not quite survive the way it should.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
You got to have a little bit of an outlet.
Say, hey, that's really good. Yeah, I get it. Great way to unwind. Whether and of course we can't leave this podcast considering where you are and where you went to school. But let's face it, the Oregon Ducks are hot, man.
Yeah,
I've become a Gator fan here, but don't have much to say about that. But the Ducks are hot.
Yeah, no, and there's really no getting around it. I was born and raised in Eugene. I grew up there.
Yeah.
I knew the coaching. I knew the coaching staff at the university since I was probably in middle school or something. The first time I had met them, and so there wasn't much of a chance I was really going to go anywhere else. It was a blast. I loved my time there. We've within the last several years moved away, and it's a bummer we're not around that community as much. But there is some. We still have a lot of family back there. There's some real excitement about what's happening right now.
I don't doubt it.
It's pretty exciting. Pretty exciting stuff. I'm looking forward to seeing what the next couple of weeks hold. So
you bet, man. We'll be watching.
Yeah.
So,
well,
hold on there, Ellen. I gotta tell the dental community this. So Elliott, I was also born in Eugene, and I went as far as having the Oregon Duck O put on the buckle of number 2. Can't see my smile. My dentist and my hygienist gets to see it, but I know that back there I've got the Oregon Duck O.
Sarah, that is very funny. Interesting tidbit about you I did not know. That's very interesting.
My dentist is a Husky fan.
To kind of move us towards
which is really funny, and kind of a side comment. A lot of the dentists I work with, they either went to Oregon State, great program there. They go to Oregon State and then will end up at OHSU or somewhere in the area. A lot of Washington fans as well. So that's it makes for interesting conversation. I don't get to brag quite as much as I would like to, but there's a few I will rub it in because they enjoy doing the same. So
yeah, exactly.
Elliott, if you could just to kind of, as we move to close this, what's a takeaway we can give? What's one piece of advice that you could give to dental professionals when it comes to tax planning for the upcoming year? What would that be at the top of the list?
Hopefully it's not too simple just to say do it, but it really is kind of, I think that simple is, you have to pay the taxes, right? Like they're not going anywhere. You got to do it. You might as well start planning around it and have I have a lot of those conversations. Sometimes they're a shock. Other times they're like, oh, it's better than I thought. But it just comes with the knowledge, right? So if I would say anything, I would say make sure that you're doing something. Do some type of planning. Try to understand how certain things in your practice will impact your tax liability, because the two things obviously play together. And simple reminder too, and this is probably the most common, or one of the most common comments I make to most practice owners is, yes, we want to pay as low as taxes as possible, but sometimes it's better to just bite the bullet and pay it, because at the end of the day, $1 might save you 35, 40 cents in taxes. That's 60 cents you're not getting back, right?
Mhm.
So there's a lot of things we look at to not only just try to help, practice owners keep their taxes low, but also really like, hey, let's look at the most cost of, or cash efficient way of going about this. So that would be my big advice.
Appreciate that. Thank you, Elliott. Just great to have you here, and your pearls of wisdom.
Thank you.
For listeners who want to learn more or have questions for you, would like to follow up with you, what's the best way? What's the best way for them to reach you?
Yeah, LinkedIn's the best, one of the best ways to do that. Obviously, send me a message. I'm happy to reach out and continue discussion. And then, I'd point you to the website, for the CPA firm. So it's or my email, which is etracy@kdpadvisors.com. So that's another way of finding me. But yeah, either LinkedIn or email is usually the best way to find me.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys so much. This was awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Appreciate it.
Oh, and we'll just look forward to connecting and being in touch here soon, okay?
All right, thanks.
All right, thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.